Any information doesn't mean anything unless you're able to shape it and make it knowledge.
It's all about harnessing knowledge, what other people are doing and how can we do things that they're doing.
We are here to understand where everyone else is. We want to stay ahead of the curve.
I've never been in this conference before, and it's going to be very valuable.
So the knowledge we're looking to gain is centered around the cloud implementation and moving from an on-prem situation to the cloud.
One of the things I like to hear about is how other people are using the products, to see how it is similar or different from how we're using them, and how we could maybe adopt some of what they do to our current processes.
So I think it's really important to say, hey, I don't know this. Who can I ask? Who can I leverage? You can Google things and Wikipedia things, but really talking and human interaction is really the best way to kind of get yourself to that next level.
I'm kind of somewhat a data scientist. What I do, I'm always looking for ways to improve and get data to management faster.
With a variety and background of different organizations that are coming here, there's a lot of knowledge to be learned.
Surrounded by different bags from different areas in the world and different backgrounds. It will help me to expand my knowledge and have some connections and see how things are working on with them with IBM.
Analytics is huge. I mean, that's something that's key to our goals this year is analytics. Providing information that's valuable, something that the business can use.
One is the capabilities of Watson, and it is being offered along with TM1. So since we already have TM1, we will want to leverage it to our business needs.
Having more information than somebody else is power, in my opinion.
We hope to take some of this knowledge back and apply it into what we do every day and do it better.
CIO said, you know what, we got to keep up with the competition. We got to use the technology available to us. We got to get our products out there fast.
Knowledge that we gain here we can use for just developing new reporting, new analytics that we can use to grow the company and make it more profitable.
I want to know more.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Mark Jeffries.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. Here we go, day 2. Nice to see so many of you yesterday. Do you know, I travel a lot, like you, I guess, just always going somewhere on a plane to a different hotel. By the way, here's a quick tip. Every time you stay in a hotel from now on, because what I always do when I arrive at a hotel is I get into my room, do a bit of unpacking, go downstairs, and instantly forget what room I'm in. So what I do now is I use my device, my phone, I just take a picture of the room number as I leave the hotel room. I promise you, if you don't do this already, this is a great tip if you're constantly staying in different places. I was recently in Morocco. I was in Marrakesh for a conference there. It was a commodities company. And I'm doing the whole social thing, walking around, talking to people, networking, because you know the value of your network is huge, right? So I'm making new connections, and a guy comes up to me and says, so, who else do you work with? And I go, oh, this company, that company. I do a fair amount with IBM. And he goes, IBM? He goes, my sister works for IBM. You've probably met her. I said, well, IBM's a pretty big company. And he goes, yeah. He goes, she's Ginny Rometty. I went, oh. Amazing who you meet on the road. Now, yesterday, we talked about the brains of influence, because we're asking you to transform your businesses. We're asking you to be entrepreneurs within your businesses. And of course, you can't do this unless you successfully influence people around you. You have to bring them around to your way of thinking. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's quite the challenge. So yesterday I mentioned the brains of influence. Remember, bridging, rationalizing, asserting, inspiring, negotiating, and specializing. Now, yesterday we talked about inspiring. I thought this morning, very briefly, we'll look at the art of negotiation. Now, we could go on for hours, and we're not going to. But briefly, think about it for a bit. We love it, don't we, when we think that when we're buying something, we've got a little something in there for free. We love it if we feel like we get away with a little something. For example, when I go to Whole Foods here in the United States, which some people call whole paycheck because it's so expensive, I go in there and I'll spend $100 on a few items of food, but I'll be so pleased if I got $1 off something. We love to get a little something back. So when you're asking for something in your business, whether it's more people, whether it's more budget, whether it's for change itself, always be prepared to give something back. And here's my tip this morning. You need to pre-negotiate. In other words, pre-decide what it is you're happy to give up, what it is you're happy just to hand back in order to get what you want. And of course, what you want is transformation. Now, I'll give you a very quick story, an example of this very idea of pre-negotiation. I used to work in TV back in the day, and not only was I sometimes on screen, nobody saw me, but I was on, but I did a lot of production as well. And I worked for a British television company called GMTV, and we did a breakfast TV show in the morning. And my job as a producer was to go out with a film crew every day, shoot some interviews, shoot some pretty pictures, package them all together with some music, and it was called a package. It would last for 3 or 4 minutes, and generally it would introduce a story or it would follow an interview on the main set. So that was my job, to produce a package. So I'd go out with the crew, we'd film the interviews, I'd get back to the edit suite, the editor and I would work together for 2 or 3 hours, make this lovely package ready to go out on air. But before it could go out on air, my producer, my senior guy, would have to come in and watch it. And every time he'd come in, he'd watch what I'd made and he'd change one thing. And it used to drive me mad, because now it was no longer the package I wanted. It would drive me insane. There was always one change. And then I realized this senior producer, he just felt like he had to make a change because he was my boss. So I started to pre-negotiate. I'd make my package up always with one deliberate error. One stupid shot I didn't even want anyway. I knew he'd see it. He'd come in, he'd go, right, Mark, let's have a look at this. He'd watch the whole thing. He goes, well, you can take that shot out. I went, oh, okay then. Ha! Then I had the package I wanted. Pre-negotiate. It's a great skill around influence. All right. So great day yesterday, of course, as you know, transformational change, it starts with you. And to champion the change, we discovered yesterday you have to be adaptive. And part of being adaptive is knowing more sooner. And that's where advanced analytics comes in. Last year, we talked about weaving analytics into the fabric of business. This year, it's all about becoming an information-driven enterprise, embracing the era of big data and cognitive computing. In short, it is about a new way to know. Well, today we're going to be hearing from some IBM clients and experts, and even a world-class athlete. And just to top it all off, we've also got a best-selling author as well. They're all leading the way when it comes to a new way to know. Now, to get us started, I wanted to just find out a little bit more from basically you, our customers. We're going to do another panel. And I'd like to welcome up to the stage 3 clients who each have a unique story to tell around how they've embraced analytics into their organization. Now, do me a favor, hold your applause until we have all 3 with us. But please welcome data scientist, predictive analytics from Jabil, Erin Housworth, Head of Information Management at Mariel, Hari Krishna, and Manager Strategy Analytics and Business Intelligence from Mueller, Mark Lack. Welcome, have a seat. Hi, how are you? Good to see you, take a seat. Welcome to our lovely stage. I always start the panel sessions the same way. I'd love to find out a bit more about you, what it is you do in your organization. So, Erin.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. I am Erin Housworth, and I am a data scientist at Jabil, focused on predictive analytics. Jabil is a manufacturing services and supply chain management provider with about 150,000 employees in 90 locations across 24 different countries. We make everything from circuit boards and electronics to medical devices and even molded plastic containers that you might find in the grocery store. So I'd venture to say that everyone here has probably interacted or used a Jabil product and not even realized it.
All right, good to know. A very impressive organization. Thank you, Erin. Hari, next up.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Hari Krishna. I'm a head of information management, work for Mariel. It's a division of Sanofi. In terms of information management, we manage business intelligence, analytics, big data, data management, and planning services.
Great. Well, welcome to our panel. And Mark, great first name, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I was thinking the same for you. My name is Mark Lack. I'm with Mueller Incorporated, Ballinger, Texas. We manufacture and retail our own steel building products across the southwestern part of the United States. So I've told you 2 pieces of information that you didn't know until now. There's a town called Ballinger, Texas, and 2, there's an industry that sells metal building products. And we're part of that. But we do have this in the southwest part of Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, a lot of places that you need to protect assets from hail, the elements, wind, that sort of thing.
You have some pretty fearsome weather down there.
As you watch the news, you'll see it today.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you very much and welcome to the panel. You heard on the opening video before one of our wonderful guests say, I just love to hear what people do with the software, how they're deploying it. So let's explore that a little bit. Erin, I understand that you use various Cognos software pieces in your organization. Tell me how that's happening today. Well, how are you using it all?
Sure. So we use a number of the IBM Business Analytics software solutions, including TM1, Cognos BI, Disclosure Management, Controller, and SPSS. TM1 and Cognos are used extensively throughout the organization by everyone from our plant-based analysts to senior level executives to capture and report on financial metrics through simple dashboards and customizable workspaces. We've also automated our financial reporting through Disclosure Management, and we leverage Controller and TM1 to streamline our monthly close process. Over the past year, we've invested and kind of started exploring predictive and statistical analyses using SPSS with the intention that that will provide an added layer of intelligence on our existing investment in the other systems.
Wow, you're really in. I mean, everyone's at a different point in the journey, but your train is moving and it's moving fast. All right, great. Now, over at Mueller, you're using SPSS, right?
Yes, we're using SPSS. We bought it a couple years ago after we were actually at the Vision Conference, and we saw how this tool could take our own internal big data and help us to understand exactly what we've been collecting all these years. My IT department's been fantastic in making sure we have plenty of data, but the question is how have we been able to unlock that? So what SPSS has made it easy to take this data, pull it into the modeling system, and give us answers very rapidly, and give us greater insight into this data that we've been collecting for a very long time.
All right, that's great. And you're also using Watson Analytics as well. Tell me about that.
You know, Watson Analytics, when I first looked at it, I didn't fully understand, you know, how is this going to add to our organization until I started to really deep down get into and look at the time savings that I received from taking data, putting it in, and then getting results.
Now, in terms of that time, because to me that's one of the most remarkable pieces here is how fast things happen. And of course, businesses love it when they can get the results they want, insight they need a little bit quicker than they were expecting. Your C-suite, they're kind of loving this, aren't they?
Well, you know, my CEO dropped in my office, as he often does, to see, you know, Mark, what are you working on? And luckily I wasn't using Watson Analytics at the time for my fantasy baseball.
Right,
I was actually using it to analyze the data, but it is a good tool for that. But he asked, what are you working on? So I wanted to show him, and I said, this is a new tool. And he says, did we pay for it? And I said, no, the great thing is this was free. And I said, I've loaded this data. I've got 9 columns of data, 10,000 transactions around our sales, from product to customer to location. And I showed how quickly, once I pushed the button, we got a graph. And he says, well, how is this different from what we have today? I said, let's ask it a question. Right. So we typed in, I said, what would you like to know? And he said, well, tell me about customer revenue by state. Type in, what is the customer revenue by state? All of a sudden a graph comes up that shows our customer revenue by state instantly. It's up there. And I said, what's interesting about this, Brian, is you look across the top, there's additional insight around your question that you just asked it that we can now explore. So Watson Analytics is thinking ahead, taking what you've asked it and think, you might also want to look at this. And he paused. He paused for a moment, looked at the screen, and then looked at me. And a fear, you know, when the CEO gets quiet, kind of went through me. I didn't know if I was going to get fired or if he was going to like this. But his reaction was, this really changes things. This changes how we're going to interact and have information flow throughout our company. And I said, you're absolutely right.
That's great. All right, well, thank you for letting us know that. It does freak me out somewhat that your CEO just regularly pops into your office and goes, hey, Mark, what are you working on? It's somewhat challenging. And over at Merial, TM1 is the flavor of the day. Tell me about the implementation of TM1.
Yes, we use TM1 for planning, forecasting, and budgeting. Prior to TM1, we used to use Cognos planning. While Cognos planning is doing the way it's supposed to do the functionality, but due to its limitations, it's not actually meeting our growing dynamic business needs. So that's where we started looking at the TM1, and the TM1's in-memory feature That brings the most important feature of performance to the business.
It's the speed again, isn't it?
Speed, exactly. And providing the information in the real time to the business. That's the key of a TM1 implementation for us.
Now, in terms of TM1, how many users, and can you tell me a little bit about those users?
We have around 1,000 plus users globally. It's very exciting. Like Cognos Planning, we used to have like 200 users approximately. With the TM1 implementation, we moved from 200 to 1,000 users globally. We implemented in every region with every entity, finance, R&D, marketing, so, and plus of course corporate finance as well. So everywhere we use TM1 for planning, forecasting, budgeting process.
Wonderful.
Sales and inventory forecasting as well.
So you're using it widely across the enterprise. That's great. Now also Marielle is using social media analytics, but I'd like to know why you guys chose IBM Cloud Solutions to help you in that area.
It's a good question. So social media analytics is a very interesting topic. If you see social media analytics, we have two parts here. Social listening, analytics, right? For any project, if you want to implement social listening and analytics, it takes several months to get the project approval, get the business buy-in, get the infrastructure, get into the business. We don't even know that time actually is really worth of the investment. So with IBM SaaS solution, cloud-based solution, it'll be amazing to hear this. Exactly in a couple of days, not more than that, we're able to implement social media analytics, which covers social listening, analytics, both together, put that technology to find unknown, unstructured data, get the insights, get the actions into the hands of the business. It took just a couple of days.
Wonderful. All right, great. So let's talk now about what analytics has allowed our clients to do. Erin, do you have any results you can share?
We do. We've had pretty remarkable success with implementing the solutions. Through the implementation of TM1 and Cognos BI, we've been able to address quite a few inefficiencies in our finance organization. We've been able to reduce the amount of time it takes for our financial reporting by about a third. Of that, all of the manual effort that was previously done by folks at the plants, we've now reduced that by about 70% through the automation features. And our monthly close process, streamlined now through Controller and TM1, has been cut down by about half. Furthermore, we've been able to roll out a bunch of self-service tools to all of our analysts that are based at the plants and really enabled them to do their own deep dive analyses and come to better, more profitable business decisions a lot more quickly than they previously were able to.
How are the users reacting? Because I assume when it's first presented to them, they're like, oh, what do I do? But now, how are they reacting?
Yeah, you know, we've been on this journey for about 7 years now, so definitely the change management up front is something to keep in mind. But it's really very pervasive throughout Jabil now. People embrace it. It is a single source of the truth, and everyone relies pretty heavily on Cognos BI to get their metrics.
Very nice, thank you. Once again, Harry, I believe integration's been very important to you in the organization.
Integration in terms of TM1, yes. So as I said just now, we are using TM1, every entity, finance, or any other units. So we had to integrate this information with the corporate. So using TM1, we were able to do very easy integration. And also being a TM1 IBM product, we are able to integrate with the Cognos business intelligence technology as well. So you can take the TM1 cubes and publish in the Cognos without going through ETL and the regular data hosting. If you see this, we have the information in TM1 real time. Same time, real time, you can publish in the business intelligence to provide more analytics. So that's the value of integration. Plus, we're able to do online, offline capability of TM1 as well using Cognos Insight.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. Mark, how would you say that analytics has changed the way you guys work over at Mueller?
You know, my goal at Mueller is to make sure that we have the right information at the right time to the right people so that they can make the right decision. And so the tools allow us to take all of this data, turn it into information, and distribute it across the enterprise, whether it's on the shop floor for the manufacturing group or it's in the C-suite to the executives, that they have the information they need to run the business. So what this has changed for our organization is when we meet now, we'll take 30 minutes of an all-day meeting and talk about what happened. The rest of the day is a value-added exercise as to what do we need to do to change our future.
Right.
So because we already know when we walk into a meeting, there's rarely would a question come up that somebody doesn't already know because we're that well informed. So it's really changed us from being a reactive organization to being a proactive organization, looking at the future and what can we do to meet our objectives.
And one more question for you. People are always fascinated to know, what have you discovered using Watson Analytics? And other people say, look, the toughest part is actually knowing what questions to ask.
That can be a challenge. What's really nice about Watson Analytics is we talked about the time. If you think about the traditional way that we're going to do either data mining or reviewing data, is you find your data, you put it into a system, you run it through the software, you run some tests, and you have this iterative process. Maybe you create a graph, you'll start sorting it, and then what do? We export it to Excel and we do some more. So what we've found is that by having this data into Watson Analytics, we pop it up. All of that iterative process that I just discussed, Watson's taking care of that. I don't ever take data from Watson Analytics into Excel because that's my new final point. And that's where I take my data. If I get a new data set or if I'm going to start some analytics today, that's where I go. And it's because it does the heavy lifting. It immediately goes from this spreadsheet into insights to answers. So the time has been taken away. I'm a lot more productive, and I have answers right now that I can share with the organization.
That's great, thank you. All right, Erin, last question goes to you. Your journey is, as we've already established, well underway, but what's next? Any new projects?
Yeah, so I think probably one of the most exciting things that's come about by bringing SPSS into Jabil is it's really prompted people to ask questions that they didn't think they could answer before. So one of the big questions that we're focused on now is we do a great job of leveraging data that we capture and we have internally, but what else is out there that maybe we're missing and might provide valuable insight and allow us to do better for our customers? So we've just finished a proof of concept looking at external data to look at social media sentiment specific to some of our more consumer-facing products and analyze how that correlates to the demand that we receive from our customers. So the whole idea behind the project was that if we could identify significant relationships between sentiment trends specific to those products and correlate those back to shifts that we see in purchasing patterns, then we can use that social media sentiment data as an input to an SPSS forecasting model and proactively be prepared for unanticipated shifts in purchases and demands that we wouldn't have seen coming otherwise.
Right.
So just last night, actually, I received an email from one of our supply chain guys asking me to hurry up and get back from Orlando so we can figure out how to get it into production.
That's so cool. But also the sentiment analysis piece is fascinating because the system has to know that when someone goes, this is sick, they don't feel ill, it's really good.
Yep, and that's probably the biggest question that comes out of the implementation. All the supply chain people were very concerned about that, especially since a lot of our products are not produced in the US and we sell globally.
Right.
We've tested with the IBM social media analytics application, and it is quite impressive what it's able to pick up on with virtually no customization on your end to get it to function properly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, your customer panel. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, so we want to now take a look at someone who is putting a whole new spin on analytics. Have a look at this. So that answers the question, who was that guy in the expo center on the bicycle and why is he even here? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to 4 times Race Across America competitor and 3-time top American finisher, Dave Hazy. Welcome, Dave. How are you?
Great. Thanks.
I have to say, first of all, thank you for dressing.
better than my Lycra.
Right, exactly, you know.
Felt strange yesterday,
on
I gotta tell you.
stage. We appreciate you being with us. First of all, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why on earth you decided to tackle this somewhat insane biking race?
Well, my real job is I own a bike shop, but the real reason I did this race is I did a race. I qualified in a 24-hour race for Race Across America. I really didn't know what Race Across America was, but I went and did this race, and I qualified, and I guess if you qualify, you should probably go do the race you qualified for.
Right.
So I went out and did that 4 times, unsuccessful 1 time, and just going out and racing. And I guess the goal in 2015 is not only to be the top American, but to win the race, racing the most perfect race that I can.
That is a great objective. And it's just fascinating. You did 1 small race, therefore you qualified for a much bigger race, and so you're going to do it. Sometimes I qualify for a credit card. I don't always go for it. But the race you're going for is 3,020 miles. That's the distance. It starts in June. You've done it before, so just give us a bit of insight. What is the best part? What is the worst part?
Well, the whole race is 3,000 miles long. I'm racing pretty much nonstop. So the game plan is to race 30 hours without any sleep, stop for 2 hours and sleep, and then continue that same pace, 2 hours of rest, maybe 22 hours across the country. I guess there are worst parts and good parts all the way across the country. So you're constantly running into a brick wall, getting back up and going across the country. You're facing the heat, the elements, and so as great as it is to see the countryside on a bicycle, there's many times you wish you were not riding your bike across the country.
It's just unbelievable. If I got 2 hours sleep, I don't think I'd be able to get up, let alone cycle across America. It took you 9 days, 12 hours last time. We now know that you sleep here and there, 2 hours, 2 hours. What about the crew that are with you? Are they on the same schedule?
The crew, no, they have a little different schedule. I have about 10 people that help me with this race and follow along in their pace vehicle. They have an RV to sleep in and all of that. I have my follow vehicle, which is going to carry my information and give me food. And generally, that's where I sleep for my 2 hours, right in the back of the van.
Why not? So you have been preparing hard for this race. Give us a bit of insight. How do you train? How do you prepare?
My training basically is I ride early in the morning, 4 to 5 hours a day. Then I go to work. I've been training I guess I've been training the last 15 years for this race, and I continue to train. So I've dialed in a lot of things. So I've dialed in my nutrition from previous races, successes and failures. When I first did this race, I didn't even have a bike computer on my bike. I just rode across the country. Then I started using, all the things we have, our Garmin's. I have my Garmin watch on now,
right.
so I've been able to collect data. I started working with a coach, and so as we're doing this, I'm collecting data using, heart rate monitors and things, and I'm getting all this data, never really knowing what to exactly do with it, but, hopefully we can use that moving forward much better.
We will move on to the data in a minute. You mentioned nutrition, though, and I bet everyone is fascinated. When you have to compete like this, what do you actually eat?
So generally, on the bike, I'm going to take in 305 calories. We really are defined in that it's 305 calories. Some of it is liquid nutrition, standard, drinks that are out there. And
Hold on, 305 in a day or?
Per hour.
Per hour?
305 per hour. Yeah, a day, yeah.
That would be, you'd be hungry. You'd be starving.
All right, so.
This could also be a weight loss objective, I mean. So hold on, go back to the liquid nutrition piece.
So we take in that liquid nutrition plus just regular food, but the key is keeping our energy level high all the way across the country. So we monitor that and take care of that all the way across the country.
It is fascinating. I have to say, though, 305 calories in liquid nutrition, I do that at the bar most nights. So I guess I'm halfway onto that journey.
You're ready to race.
Analytics, let's just go. Analytics can be the superfood, right, that helps your training and your recovery. So let's move on to that analytics side now. Tell us what you've actually learned.
So what I've learned is that IBM has built what they're calling the Internet of Dave, and what that allows me to do is I wear a heart rate strap that monitors data. It monitors respiration, my breathing, my heart rate, my core body temperature. Of course, the GPS is going to monitor speed and cadence, and I get my power. We're doing some lactic acid type of things that can measure that while we're riding. So we're collecting all this data in devices, and then what we're going to do with that is use it to make me race faster, I guess.
So you've got all that sensor output, very valuable data, tons of it. You're putting it into Watson Analytics, and then it creates a sort of picture for you. And I think we're looking now at something you use as part of your big training. So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing here.
So what you see here is a segment of a race. It's the training ride. And when you're out riding, your perception of what's actually going on when you're out for 22, 23 hours at a time is way different than maybe what's really happening. So what we're trying to do is push that power curve up as high as we can through training and just general fitness, and then continue that all the way across the country, trying to make that power curve stay as high as possible, but as flat as possible all the way across, so that it's a consistent speed all the way across the country. And like I say, perception, sometimes in this power curve, there's a big dip in that power curve, and in that power curve, where my power dropped, I actually thought I was doing just fine, and then there were moments in that ride that the power curve stayed really steady, and I felt like I was really suffering from the heat. So it's very interesting to take what is perceived to be accurate and what is real and what is really happening.
What you're saying is you've got to trust the data almost over how you physically or emotionally feel. I mean, it's a rough analogy, but I once learned how to fly a plane, and my instructor told me, he says, if you're in mist or in fog and you think you're descending or you think you're ascending or descending, he says, ignore that, just look at the instruments, look at the data. So that's really what you're saying. Now, on race week, it's interesting because you shift slightly and you start using the data to help you make decisions. So again, let's show you guys something different. What is this? What are we looking at?
So this is a dashboard that's going to be in the crew vehicle that follows me, and what they see is my cadence, my heart rate, my speed, and a few other things and information. And what we're going to do with that information is, instead of just going by intuition, we're going to be able to see changes in weather and make decisions while we're racing. So my crew can look at all this that's coming through, and we'll actually have a recommendation through predictive analytics using Weather Channel and different things involved to say, hey, maybe I should rest because the wind is going to be in our face for the next 2 hours and I'm really tired, or maybe we've got a tailwind and we can keep going, and we know that through changes. The cool thing for me is this data changes, so as my performance going across the country is good or bad, it will constantly change, and my crew can make really valuable decisions that they can relay to me to continue on across the country.
So your electronic faceless coach says push it. Will you ever ignore that because you're tired, or will you obey the data?
Well, hopefully I'm going to trust the analytics and use some intuition, but really I'm going to go with what the data says and try to race my perfect race using all these analytics and get to... I guess the goal is to win the race. That's why I'm doing it.
That would be nice. Well, on behalf of everyone in this room, on behalf of IBM, we wish you the best of luck. The race starts on June 16th in Oceanside, California. We hope to follow you along your entire journey. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Haase. Thanks, Dave. Thank you. Wow. Well, Dave Haase makes it his business to know what he can expect to face, right, during that 3,020-mile bike race. But what can IBM Analytics help you to know? Have a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Gordon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. No, I was just noticing, apparently this is the part of the program this morning where we're going to put all the amazing human physical specimens back to back. So thanks, Dave, for leading us off. You guys have heard a lot about Watson Analytics today. So I run strategy and innovation for IBM's entire Watson group. Hopefully you've started to see how Watson Analytics is fundamentally going to transform how we empower people with expertise to be able to be like some of the best analysts. I thought Mark Lack's story up here was particularly compelling when he said his CEO can now start to get the kind of insights he needs just by asking a question. Right? There's only so many of us, you guys are experts in this room, who understand how to use analytics, but when we can start putting that power in the hands of every business user, we transform what's possible. So that's great. So maybe we won't all be like Dave and be able to bike across, but all of us know within our industries that there's a way that we can have experts in our field. If we move on to the next chart here, you'll be able to see people all around us that are experts. It doesn't matter what our field is. Some of you guys are experts in analytics, but we have experts in sales. We have experts in law. We have experts in areas like cooking. We have experts everywhere. And in every one of those, they try to create innovations, and they can solve problems differently from all of us. So what I wanted to do in this segment is take a step back and show you how what we're doing in the Watson group of technology that you've now seen some of in Watson Analytics can help all of us become experts across our companies in different spots. So let's think about experts and what makes all of these people think differently. If we go on to the next slide, you'll see that this process of cognition that we do, everybody does this, right? We all think about problem solving the same way. You guys who are in this analytics space know this even better than most, but we observe information, or we take in, what do we see, what's the input that's out there? Then how do we interpret that so that we know what it means, right? We heard a lot of comments about the information is good, but the interpretation is more important. So then once we know the information and we can interpret it, how do we decide what to do? How do we pick a set of options that we can evaluate and ultimately make a decision on what's best for our business, right? And what's the right way to move forward? So that's something that all of us do right now and a way to set that up. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see here that it's not just about what we do. Experts can do this more deeply and more broader. Why is that? When they observe the world, they have more knowledge. They've read more studies. If you're a doctor who specializes in stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer, you might know everything about that other generalists and primary care physicians wouldn't know. You have more knowledge. When you're interpreting things, you have more context. You see the differences. You see the chains and the connections between areas because you've had that experience. You actually know more options to evaluate. Even if you're looking at risk, you know, how can I mitigate risk because you've done more. You've seen more areas. You've experienced the way people make decisions, and knowing those decisions gives you more choices. And then finally, when you decide what to do, you have experience, right? You have seen what works, what doesn't work, and can make those decisions. So when we think about Watson technology, beyond just what you saw in Watson Analytics, which is helping us all become better analysts, helping business users, everyone, be empowered to be the best analysts, we're now thinking about this more broadly in terms of all types of decision making. Let's see how Watson can help all of us think like experts.
Unlike conventional approaches to computing, which can only handle neatly organized structured data, such as what is stored in a database, Watson can understand unstructured data, which is 80% of data today, all of the information that is produced primarily by humans for other humans to consume. This includes everything from literature, articles, research reports, to blogs, posts, and tweets. While structured data is governed by well-defined fields that contain well-specified information, Watson relies on natural language, which is governed by rules of grammar, context, and culture. It's implicit, ambiguous, complex, and a challenge to process. While all human language is difficult to parse, certain idioms can be particularly challenging. In English, for instance, we can feel blue because it's raining cats and dogs, while we're filling in a form someone asked us to fill out. When it comes to text, Watson doesn't just look for keyword matches or synonyms like a search engine. It actually reads and interprets text like a person. It does this by breaking down a sentence grammatically, relationally, and structurally, discerning meaning from the semantics of the written material. Watson understands context. This is very different than simple speech recognition, which is how a computer translates human speech into a set of words. Watson tries to understand the real intent of the user's language and uses that understanding to possibly extract logical responses and draw inferences to potential answers through a broad array of linguistic models and algorithms. Across an organization, Watson scales and democratizes expertise by surfacing accurate responses and answers to an inquiry or question. Watson also accelerates expertise by surfacing a set of possibilities from a large body of data, saving valuable time. Today, Watson is revolutionizing the way we make decisions, become experts, and share expertise in fields as diverse as law, medicine, and even cooking. Further, Watson is discovering and offering answers and patterns we hadn't known existed faster than any person or group of people ever could, in ways that make a material difference every day. Most important of all, Watson learns, adapts, and keeps getting smarter. It actually gains value with age by learning from its interactions with us and from its own successes and failures, just like we do. So, now that you know how it works, how do these ideas inspire how you work? How can Watson make you a better expert? What will you do with Watson?
So this is the new concept of cognitive computing we've been focused on across the Watson Group, the technology that empowers Watson Analytics. Our goal is to now help us scale expertise. You all have experts across your companies. You have your best salespeople who know a lot about the products and solutions you sell. You have the best analysts. You have the best people who drive risk management. We want to help them take that level of understanding what they do and empower all of us to have that level of insight. And so when we think about this, this is a partnership between people and systems that allow them to think differently. We've now seen this apply in a lot of other cases. For example, to change the way we engage at Deakin University, students are using Watson to learn about career paths, to learn about how they can work with the organization, how they can build their college experience, addressing questions that they have that, frankly, they don't go to anyone else to talk about. So instead of meandering through their educational experience, they're finding ways that they can go and interact with Watson and learn more about what the options are, right? It's broad sets of expertise that's coming forward. In the Discover space, the Institute of Culinary Education in New York City, we took a completely different approach. We wanted to see if technology could make us more creative. So in this case, the chefs at the Culinary Institute here are using Watson to come up with ideas. Maybe I want to make a Mediterranean lasagna. Maybe I want to try something that's never been tried before. And Watson doesn't give them answers. It points them out ideas of things they could try to put together because it's read everything it can about food science, everything it can about flavor combinations, feedback, right? It doesn't give them a recipe. It doesn't give them an answer. It points them in a direction to go be more creative, and it's opening up what we can do as people. And then finally, making decisions at MD Anderson in Houston, Texas, one of the top cancer institutes in the whole world. They're now using the power of Watson to read every bit of medical research that's available to them to go out and help their physicians who have analytic data on their 100,000 patients they see a year, but they're combining it with research about all of the latest information being published where they don't yet have any data, because it's too new, it's too cutting edge. But putting those two together helps them dramatically change. So these are whole types of different systems. You're going to see all of this technology come forward to help interact with people more naturally, interact with the world. Whether we just ask it a question, as we heard before, or it's reading information for us, or we have projects that are looking at reading images and understanding visuals that are out there. Interacting naturally is important. Understanding how to reason in a complex scenario where there's no right answers. We have to come up with options and assess probabilities, and that's what most of us have to do every day. We don't have clear-cut answers and decisions. We have to weigh options and figure out how to do it. And finally, learn from experience. So when you combine these types of capabilities with analytics, you get the power of Watson Analytics that all of you have seen today. By the way, I think you've never had a better chance to get Watson Analytics and have lots of people around you help you use it today. So if you have not yet registered before you leave this conference, you're missing out on a big opportunity. Okay, so with that, we're now making it easier for people to start developing solutions to scale expertise with Watson. We built a developer cloud for the developers in your organization to start harnessing a lot of the core components of this technology we're building into our own products to build into your products. And you'll start to see some of that. So that core technology on the bottom here that's in Watson, the ways it perceives the world and it reasons about things and it learns and interacts, we're building into IBM products. So Watson Analytics is one of the very first examples of how we're putting Watson into our own technology to change the experience. I think you guys will agree with me from what you've seen, it dramatically changes the experience. So with that, you can see there's a tremendous amount of information that's available, lots of things that we just don't have time to read, to go through, to become experts in. If we could make even more and better decisions than we have before. So that's the path that we're driving Watson into. I'm really excited about where we are so far with Watson Analytics, and you're going to see this expand in a lot of other ways. So to continue on this thought of all the data that's being produced that we don't have time to read, I want to introduce the leader of our Twitter partnership, who certainly has trillions of tweets. I don't know if you guys could read them all, but there's a lot out there today. Jennifer Okimoto. Please welcome Jennifer to the stage. Thanks, Jennifer.
Traditionally, organizations have relied on data generated by internal systems in order to make decisions. However, now we're seeing a huge surge in the amount of external data that's becoming available to us as well. IBM is receiving weather information from our partnership with the Weather Channel. Weather is a huge predictor of business performance, and it's responsible for nearly $500 billion in economic impact in the US alone each year. IBM is also addressing the challenges of harnessing external data by investing in an Internet of Things business unit. We aim to drive insights into business operations by capitalizing on the data generated by devices such as smartphones, tablets, connected vehicles, appliances. A huge amount of external data also comes from social media networks. We're partnering with both Twitter and Facebook to further explore the usability of real-time conversational and global social media data. With all this data available, our challenge becomes making sense of what it is and driving meaning that accelerates competitive advantage. There was a time when social data was only used for monitoring what customers were saying about products and brands. We're moving into an era where it's important to recognize that social isn't a silo. Rather than analyzing social data independently, in fact, we must realize that social is only one piece of an overall puzzle. Significantly more value can be derived by viewing social information in the context of other data. For example, when social media is put into the right context, companies can understand things like how local weather can impact your customer's experience and churn patterns, how faulty parts or equipment may have breakdowns or accidents prior to the trend reporting that emerges from warranty, repairs, or service centers, how a celebrity can influence demand and require you to change your supply chain. Consider social data as the pulse of the planet. 1 billion tweets are generated every 40 hours. It's a huge amount of data. And yes, while there is much noise in all that data, it also surfaces unexpected nuggets about human behavior and decision making. And we're finding that there are things that we're learning that no one even thought to wonder about. External data is about context, not just the content. Let's take Twitter as an example. For every 140-character tweet, there are up to 65 data elements that can be derived from it. Not just what a user provides, such as their Twitter handle, their personal description, or their formal location. @Jen Okimoto lives in Mill Valley, California. But it includes all sorts of contextual information that can be derived, such as follower counts, retweets, time between tweets and retweets, URLs that are shared, language that is used, what apps are used, what devices are used. Consider what is possible if you use social data to detect life events, graduation, marriages, buying a new home, and you refine your consumer segmentation and match it with customer or sales data or loyalty data. The key is to know how to bring together these bits and pieces of disparate information to provide meaningful perspectives that can help solve your business problems. Since the entire point of collecting all this data is to enable better decision making, organizations need structures to drive action. Many organizations drive action based on historical patterns and trends, and they have planning cycles that are designed for months or years into the future. But as you combine external and enterprise data sources, and you analyze what's happening in real or near real time, you must have the structures in place to surface the insight, make decisions, and mobilize your people and organizations to act with speed and agility today. We hope you're up for the challenge. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Altshuler.
So there is a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of information in here. We heard through Alistair's keynote yesterday, the various keynotes today, and I know it's all starting to blur together at this point. One example for me yesterday was I actually got introduced into a meeting as Mark Alistair. So, but I do want to drop one more data point on you, and this was actually a presentation I was sitting through where someone was doing one of those 83% this, 38% this, 24% this. But one that really stuck with me was this one. Organizations have self-assessed, and based on this self-assessment, they are harnessing and using 12% of the data they gather. Only 12%. And then you start to think of all the data they're not using, right? We talked about weather data. We talked about social data here a moment ago, right? And you start to augment those data sets, socioeconomic data, all those other data sources that you can start to bring in, and you start to scratch your head. It's what's it going to take to unlock that next 12%? Think about it. We have all the BI tools. We have the first generation data discovery tools. We have all these other assets that we've been employing just to get to this 12% mark. It's going to really take something different, right? It's going to take these smart data discovery tools, these statistical interrogations that we've been talking about, this cognitive discovery approach. That's what we feel it's going to take to get further into this data journey. Take a restaurant as an example. Take a restaurant in a strip mall down the street from yourself. Yeah, they have all their POS data. They load that POS data in. They can see patterns about what their customers are doing. If you were in the SPM keynote with me, you heard me tell more of the Honest Cafe story. Jing talked about it yesterday morning, and all these patterns. But the other thing I learned from Honest Cafe was, what about weather, right? What about what people are saying about your products? Absolutely. Is it snowing out? Is it raining out? Is it sunny out? That absolutely impacts what people are ordering, when they're coming to their restaurant, what are they doing takeout, when are they doing deliveries. So again, it starts to get to what's it going to take to do this next 12%. Now, I went out a few months ago with one of our client success folks, and she said to me right before the meeting, and we were going out to showcase Watts Analytics to one of our clients, and she said to me right before the meeting, she said, you know, I want to make sure I understand what Watts Analytics is. Do you mind if I explain it to you and you tell me if I'm right? And ever since she explained it to me, I've stolen her explanation and I use it everywhere. Now, maybe she heard it from someone else, but I love it. So we talk about predictive analytics and we talk about Watts Analytics. What's the difference? What's the same? So predictive analytics, she explained to me, was like taking a spotlight, you shine it around your business, and you look for things that are interesting. So equipment failures, we talked about that. We talked about the Pratt & Whitney use case yesterday. Fraud is another common area, right? We want to go in there and we want to be able to automatically know if someone's doing something fraudulent with credit cards so that we can turn it off and we can protect you. So fraud is another one of those. Customer churn, which customers are at risk of leaving the organization? Or even sales pipeline, right? And you start getting into which ones are the good leads, which ones are the bad leads. We have so many leads coming in from the website. How should we prioritize follow-up? There's a lot of conventional ways, and that's traditional predictive analytics. So in traditional predictive analytics, you take a spotlight, you shine it around your business, and when you find something that's interesting, you tune it. What Watts Analytics is it's like taking stadium lights, shining across your business, and it finds everything that's interesting, but you would still use our statistical tools like Modeler, like Stats, to then go in there and tune it further. This gets me really excited when I start to think about it in terms of all the things we can do. Number one, even for a data scientist, right? Where does a data scientist spend a lot of their time? They try to find the statistical model. What are the key drivers? Quick story on this to help you appreciate what I'm getting at. Legends Hospitality. So Legends runs the stadium operations for a number of the large sports franchises that are out there. Legends was trying to figure out why their per attendee revenue was growing year to year, and they had a whole bunch of theories, and they had their data scientist team working on it, and they were doing a lot of trial and error to try to figure out what was driving this. So they took 81 events, and they took 9 variables that they thought might be driving this. They loaded it into Watts Analytics, and they found a model with 82% predictive strength in terms of what was driving the revenue growth per attendee. So at this point, they kind of sit back, they look, and they start laughing. And they show it to their colleagues, and their colleagues go, and I think this is the quote, "Dude, weren't you trying to find that for 6 months?" Like, literally, that's how quick it is, right? And we hear these stories over and over again from data scientists in terms of how quickly it helps them find that high-level model, and then they can use their tools and they can tune it. Well, then I think about you and I, right? And I think about this whole data science area where even when we have a data scientist department, we have these kind of typical use cases that we tend to take and we tend to drop into that department. It's always the things. It's always the customer churn, the fraud, right? The sales pipeline analysis and those types of use cases. What about the use cases you haven't discovered yet, right? What about the things that could be tuned that no one thought there was a pattern there, that we then pick up that pattern and then you can even take it further. You can operationalize it directly into your business. So that's where I get excited for all of us in terms of what we can do here with Watson Analytics. What I want to do here next is I'm going to bring up John Coulthard here in a moment, and John's going to give you another look at Watson Analytics from a different perspective versus what we saw yesterday. Yesterday we saw more of an emphasis on the prediction side, showing you some of the exploration. John's going to start with some of the exploration and then go a little bit into the prediction at the end. But a couple things to watch for here. One is this is a self-service platform. We talked about 60,000 people already being on it through our freemium offering that we have in the market. So people that are getting out there, getting going themselves, there's lots of content to get you going, but they're out there using it. It takes you on an analytic journey through your data. You're especially going to see that today with what John shows you. It's for any data, and what I mean by any data, big or small data, supports Twitter data now within Watts Analytics. Skill set. The skill set is for business users who are comfortable working in data, right? So if you have spreadsheets, if you're working with data files today, that's who we've built it for, and you interact with it in natural language. So John, why don't you come up here and join me? And just to tee up a little bit of what John's going to do here. So yesterday, when you watched Matt's demo, you saw him a few times pinning different visualizations, different discoveries he had. So John is now working in his department, and someone he works with has actually done that. They've pinned a whole bunch of visualizations together and they've put it into a story. John's going to walk through that story they shared with him. He's then going to do some of his own exploration, some questions that occur to him based on seeing that story, and then he's going to conclude by adding into that story. So John.
Thanks a lot, Mark. So I think I heard Mark Lack a little bit earlier say something about, we take a whole bunch of analytics and we drop it into another spreadsheet tool, or we drop it into a presentation tool. And really, I built this little company for myself called My Solar Inc. And I really asked the team, I just want to see the numbers. I just want to see the elements that are the outcome. And when you think about it, when you go into that senior executive meeting, when you go into a team meeting, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, what is a video worth? So what we do in Watson Analytics is give you that flexibility and versatility to actually just play the story. So I'm hitting play here on my video, and what you're seeing in this video is a bunch of call-outs based on the stuff that Matt and Suman and some of my other team members found out. So I can see very quickly, we hit a new company target. I'm a small business, right? 4.5 million is great. I can see our top reps here. I can see Sarah, James, and Shirley. I can see that our forecasting team is doing rather well at keeping up with the rolling forecast and keeping demand. They're showing me that there's some interesting correlation here between our product contribution, and I can see water heating systems were doing really well. And now let's look at what that really means. Well, commercial's still our best product offering area, and I can see that water heating is doing well. And I see that the distribution across Orlando and Tampa, which are my major areas, is fairly well balanced. But I'm really curious now, so they've got me intrigued. what is going on in my business? And that was a great way to start me on the process. But really, at the end of the day, what we really wanted Watson Analytics to be all about is actually making a difference to the business and making the difference to the individual who might see some information and want to go a little bit further. So you can see here I've logged in and I've got a whole bunch of information available to me. I've got some Twitter data sets here. I've got some Excel data sets. So let's actually go and look at the underlying data that they brought to me. And without even looking at anything else, I can just quickly scan through all the starting points that Watson Analytics has for me. And this is based on what John Gordon was just talking about, where we start putting some intelligence around your data. So it starts thinking about patterns that are interesting. And why do you think this pattern's interesting? Well, I immediately look at it and see that Orlando is just skyrocketing at the tail end of 2014. So that's very interesting and intriguing, and I want to know why I don't have that same level of lift in Tampa. I really need to understand what's happening. Now, of course, we've probably got some sales professionals in the room here, and it might be interesting to know really what's happening on a city-by-city basis or a department-by-department basis. So let me just ask it a question. So I'm going to really just simply ask what the breakdown is of sales by, let's start with city and maybe department. So it's just going to do some autofill here. I'm going to ask the question. Watson's going to go away and think about it. And what you'll notice right away is the visualization coach and Watson are working hand in glove here, where they're actually pulling together, based on my question, it's actually found a very relevant, appropriate answer for me. But I might also want to look at a comparative, so that's also quite relevant. And by the way, there's another one down here that might be interesting, which is just inverting the fields that I'm looking for. So I'm asking it a natural language question, and I can very quickly get in and see the information. And as I browse through this, it's all interactive for me. The highlight bar at the top that's showing me some other relevant insights. Anything that you see here in the blue highlight fields allow me to really dig in and find out what is going on in my business. I can look at things like year-over-year growth if that's in my data set today. Or I can extend my data set. I actually have full data refinement capabilities in here for hierarchies, groupings, creating my own calculations. And what I can see here is that I've got 3 reps that are doing really fantastic, James, Sarah, and Shirley, who we already talked about in that video vignette. But what I really start seeing is that they're both selling in the same territory. And maybe that's something that I want to start looking at. And this is where we extend out into looking at territory optimization and the like. Now, I'm going to switch a little bit of gears because obviously as a senior leader for this business, there's always some data that I really don't want to share with everyone else. So I'm going to go into my own personal folder here and start looking at some data that might be associated to my risk. I had a really great end of the year, and I really want to make sure that as I go through that and through the next year, through 2015, that I'm actually able to really assess what's going on. So I have a bit of my risk data here coming in from the GRC platform we use, Open Pages, and I'm just going to ask, another simple question. So how does net loss compare? And we're going to look at this maybe by region and by business. So I want to see, I've got that Orlando and Tampa region set up. I want to see what's going on there. So, and business, and we'll just ask it that question. And right away, again, it starts looking at this and it starts filling it in. Now, if I didn't know how to ask a question, it's also in there. It gives you that guided intelligence to be able to ask the questions. And what I see right away when I start looking at this is I've got obviously a potential issue here in Northeast Orlando where I've got installations are tracking a little bit high on loss, and that's probably not a good thing. But if I filter out and just look at the green bar, because it looks pretty stable across all the different regions I'm looking at, I really notice that I might have a problem here in accounts receivable. Well, just like Aaron was talking about in terms of going on a predictive journey, you can start that journey in Watson Analytics. So when you start that journey in Watson Analytics, you pick a target, something like net loss, and it gives you the ability to go in and actually take the information and build a model around it. Now, this model is basically telling me something very straightforward, which is the various elements of my business are going to drive net loss. So there's obviously some type of an issue, and I saw that because I saw that accounts receivable was having a challenge. Now, that isn't overly compelling, but what is compelling is I actually can see that if I add a couple of more fields to this, it's going to give me a little bit more detail. And this is what we're talking about in terms of creating that citizen data scientist approach where we can start you on the journey and we can take you full end to end by pushing you into the right solution to actually then take those stadium lights that Mark talked about and really focus it on your business. And where I need to focus in accounts receivable is sitting there looking at potentially some issues around market practices or my transactional data management. So maybe I'm not getting my receivable notices out and the like. So now as a senior leader, what I would probably do next is I'd probably go back to that visual story and I'd start putting my flair on it. So I'm going to quickly go in and start working on that. I'm going to go into the edit mode. I'm going to create a new scene, and basically I'll take all of that information, all of the interactions and the pins that you saw me go through, and actually drag them and push them into my next version or my next slide of the story. Play that back for my senior leadership team and be able to tell a much more compelling story. So I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of how Watson Analytics works for a business, but Mark, I think this kind of gives you a context to take us through where we're going next.
So I often get asked during my meetings, where are we going next in terms of the platform? And we're very excited in terms of some of the things we have down the pipe. Actually, if you guys could just take me back one slide here. So some of the things we're working on in the labs, and just to kind of give you a sense of the theme that we're working under and the spirit that we work within, one of the large analyst firms was asking us, so they're like, so we have right now that you're in something called continuous delivery. Are you guys going to be moving to weekly or quarterly or annual releases, and when are you doing that? You'll never see a version 1.1, a version 1.2, a version 2.0. We are in continuous delivery forever. That's why I thought it was so great what we heard yesterday around this idea of always being in beta. That's how we view ourselves actually in this. We are always rolling out new functionality. People that have been out on the platform so far are always seeing things added all the time. One of the big things for us is this focus on user engagement and success. We're always tuning this experience. You're going to see us even testing new things within the experience. We actually have a whole testing vehicle where two people could log in and they could actually see a slightly different experience because we're just trying to learn and we're trying to see what leads you down the right path, what gets you those big outcomes. We are also pushing in terms of going from these personal and work group editions. We're going to be bringing out our enterprise edition later this year. Lots more scale, lots more connectivity options are coming into that. And then just building on what John talked about with the Watson Group. So John and I actually, you'll never see us meet. We meet in these dark alleys and no one can ever see us because he's my cognitive arms dealer, right? And that's one of the things that's really great about IBM is I have a whole bunch of arms dealers that I get to work with. And one of the other arms dealers we're excited about is something called DataWorks. And DataWorks is something that's going to be coming in later this year. This is my data stewardship arms dealer. So far we have these refinement options in here where you can load in your data, you can filter it, you can shape it, you can subset it. But this group is going to deliver us a suite of enterprise level connectors that are coming, advanced data shaping options, and even something called data quality services. What are those? Things like if you load in a zip code and you're missing the city, it populates the city for you. If you have mixed case sensitivity, it would harmonize all those cases for you. So we're really excited about bringing that capability in as well. And then two things that I wanted to drill into a little bit more, but as I do this, I wanted to emphasize when we tier Watson Analytics, the free version, the personal version, the professional version, and in future the enterprise version, we don't tier it based on the analytical capability. The analytical capability you're seeing is available in all of the versions. What we tend to tier it on is around cloud space and size and connectivity and those enterprise type, multi-user type options. So one of the things we're excited to bring to the platform to all editions later this year is something called Watson Analytics Stories. At least that's what we're calling it so far. This is the other half. This is the topical sub-community. So if you're interested in sales rep productivity, if you're interested in customer churn, you'll be able to subscribe into one of these stories, map your data into one of those stories, and just like the demo John showed you, they would all be storytelling oriented. So as soon as you map your data in, the person who authored that story would be taking you through an entire story of how you analyze this type of data. We think it's game changing. The other thing that we're really excited about is just the other analytical capabilities as they come in. One of the exciting ones due out very soon is forecasting. So we have the prediction so far. The prediction is going to tell you what's going to happen and the likelihood of it's happening. Forecasting is about putting an amount on that. It's about taking time series data, so data that has a date field that specifies this is January, this is February, et cetera, and taking that data and extrapolating it forward and putting a forecast amount on it. So how does that work? Well, in TM1 today, you have your forecast based on existing as an example. You take sales this year, you want to spread it based on sales last year. Absolutely, this does this as well. In TM1 today, you can say, hey, let's take sales this year and let's do it based on sales headcount. And you can spread based on another row. Same capability, because we want to match those capabilities, and we're working with the TM1 group on this. What have we added that's transformative? The third option, where we actually build a forecast model, right? And what this is if you have 100 rows in your plan, we would statistically interrogate all those rows, and we'd find what's the combination of rows that's truly driving sales, and we would actually give you the forecast model, and we'd give you the strength of that model over time. So we think, again, that's going to be really, really, really something that's interesting to all of you, something that makes your forecast, just gives you a completely different light you can shine on those forecasts going forward. So a couple things that I just wanted to recap here as I conclude. Again, 60,000 people already on the platform, free version out, personal version out, professional version just got released April 28th. Alistair announced yesterday, all of our SPM and TM1 customers, we're giving you 75 professional seats for a year. You can sign up here. How do you sign up? In the demo bar, right at the very end. So if you walk straight down in the demo room, there are people there that can help you get registered. A call out to all the IBM client success folks that are here. Help your customers get here. You can sign up after the event, but there's no better spot to get the information you want, to get the questions answered, than to start the process here. An exciting addition to this announcement is that next week or the week after, we'll be rolling it out to other customers. So our risk customers, our Algo, our Open Pages customers, our disclosure management customers, our controller customers, we're going to be giving it to you as well. So if you are interested and you want to be notified as soon as that happens, also make your way to the demo bar at some point before it closes in the exhibit hall. Express your interest, give them your name, and they'll make sure that you're notified when we're ready to roll that out. So a lot of exciting things happening here. Please don't miss the opportunity. Please get going here. People that can show you more detail as well in the demo room. With that, I'm going to call up Mark Jeffries. Mark is going to actually bring up a few new members of the Analytics Solutions team, ask them a couple questions and give you a sense of what they're working on. Thanks, Mark.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mark Altschuler. So, one brief final panel before we lead to our final speaker. So let me welcome up the Director of Social Media Analytics, Elsinora Martinez, and Chief Architect Analytics Solutions, Jean-Francois Puget. Welcome. Hello. Have a little sit down. Good to see you. Take a seat. So once again, just tell us a bit about yourselves and what you're doing here at the organization. And I know that your story is a little bit different, isn't it? Is it not?
Yes, it is, actually. Until about 30 days ago, actually 34 days ago, I know this is an audience that appreciates precision. I was sitting as a IBM customer, longtime IBM customer, with a lot of the TM1 and BA products and social media analytics. So I'm happy to be here. And happy to know...
You jumped the fence.
I did. I jumped ship.
All right, carry on.
And I'm so happy that social today has taken such an important role on main stage, because I'm happy to be part of a team that is providing the foundation for all of these transformational stories that we're hearing with Jabil and Merrill and what Jen Okamoto was talking about. And so I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. We're very happy to have you. Jean-Francois?
So I'm quite new to the solutions team, but I've been working with analytics and optimization, building software for 25 years.
Fabulous. Well, welcome to you as well. So, Elsinora, a couple of questions for you. Social media, marketing, they're great partners. Any cool examples for this audience that we can add to the conversation?
Absolutely. So I was an accountant in a former life, and so I think some of the use cases around finance I'm very familiar with. And I spent about 15 years in the hospitality industry, but it was always for a very financially driven organization. And so social media had taken very front and center part of the conversation in the last couple of years. And I think one important use case that I don't hear maybe discussed as often today is the idea of using social media around earnings season. So we all know that rumors of mergers and acquisitions will, impact the stock price. And so imagine being able to take a pulse and the sentiment around using social media around earnings call time. Our product has the ability to not only look at Facebook and Twitter, but also is able to look at blogs and wikis and news and analyst reports And so all of that can be used to work in conjunction with the Office of Finance and Investor Relations, CFOs and CEOs, to really make sure that those investor concerns and the sentiment around the market and the products is addressed in some of the earnings calls.
And it gives that, especially that executive board, just that essential piece of extra information they might need at that crucial time.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, we also heard Erin talking before about using sentiment analysis as a kind of tool of prediction. Any more thoughts on that?
You know, one of the use cases at my former company, and I think this is also a takeaway for this audience here, is the idea of using social media as another tool in the Office of Finance to challenge the organizations around the departments. So to give you an example, I know a lot of capital expenditures need to be approved by investment committees. And so next time an organization comes to your investment committee and has a request for funds, challenge them to use social media to validate the sentiment. Something that happened at our company is we had our design and construction department go to the investment committee and they wanted to change the investment in a rooms product. And we had two options. We can either engage with a third-party consulting services to conduct a survey for $30,000 to $50,000, or we could invest in a social media platform that would allow us to not only answer that specific question, but to really build some of these living, breathing documents that allow us to expand on some of those social data sets. And so I think that's a great takeaway for this audience as you're sitting in some of these planning sessions, is take that, challenge your departments to use social media as a tool that can validate that.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Let me turn the conversation to Jean-François. How do you think all this external data is changing the art of decision making?
Right. So it's been said several times, the role of analytics is to enable decisions based on data. And we've seen that the first step is to create insights. For instance, what's analytics? You get insights in minutes. The problem then is to turn these insights into action. And IBM can help you again with technologies like decision management or decision optimization. What's new, these technologies are proven in, say, supply chain management. What's new is that we can apply this technology to a whole set of new use cases thanks to all this new external data.
Now, can you give us an example of any sort?
Actually, we got a great example this morning with Dave Hazy, Perfect Race. In that race, we're working with Dave and his crew to help them make the best decision during the race. And for that, we leverage data from the Internet of Dave, so his physical condition, the rate at which he's racing, but we also forecast. We predict his future conditions, and we use predicted weather data from the Weather Channel. And we're using these forecasts, those insights, to help Dave decide where to rest. So this is depicted in those little boxes. But we can also help Dave say, for instance, we recommend you rest at this time, but if he feels good and wants to race further, we can tell him, okay, if you race 2 hours more, it will only cost you 5 minutes, so it's probably worth it. With other conditions, it could be, oh, if you keep racing for 2 hours, you will get headwind and you will lose 1 hour. In that case, he may just follow our recommendation. But he is in charge. He is the one making decision. The point is we're providing data, insight, and what-if analysis to support the decision.
And what is the innovation that's enabled all of this to
Yeah,
happen?
so I said these are proven technology but applied in new use case. And in that case, we need to provide decision at the point of action on the road, leveraging data from the weather company. This calls for a cloud solution. The innovation that we announced at this conference is that decision optimization is available as a cloud solution in the coming weeks. So if you want to know more, you can go to the demo booth, or you can attend a session later today to see how this new cloud offering can be used in your business solution. And this complements previous announcements. So you've seen What's on Analytics, which is a cloud solution. We've announced previously BI on cloud. We've announced predictive analytics, SPSS on cloud. Now IBM offers a full range of analytics going from discovery, insights, and decision optimization.
That sounds great. Great innovation. Wonderful stories. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you,
A big
Mark.
thank you to Elsinora and Jean-François. Thank you. So lots of stuff to think about there, but here is one more thing.
All of the problems of the world could be settled easily if men were only willing to think.
All of the problems of the world.
All of the inefficiencies.
Complexity.
Bad information.
Bad decisions.
Could be settled easily.
All of the opportunities could be realized
If we were only willing
to see patterns in data that we could never see before.
Put analytics in our hands.
reinvent businesses in the cloud.
Fight cybercrime with math.
Design a machine that thinks like we do.
If we were only willing.
To use data.
And science.
And curiosity.
To track epidemics.
Clear traffic.
Clear the air.
Predict breakdowns. Blockbusters.
Injuries.
Blackouts.
So that everybody
And everything becomes smarter every day.
All of the problems of the world
could be settled easily.
If men,
women,
students,
leaders,
citizens, machines
were only willing
to think.
So, life is filled with questions. How early should you get to the airport? How do tall parents have short children? What's the best way to get rich playing the lottery? Good questions, right? How can I stay ahead of the competition? An essential one. Well, today's guest speaker has a simple answer to all of that. Mathematics, which, when you know more about him, should come as no surprise. He's the the John D. MacArthur Professor of Mathematics at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Wired, Slate, Boston Globe, you name it. He's the author of 2 books, including the best-selling How Not to Be Wrong, The Power of Mathematical Thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jordan Ellenberg.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm going to tell a bunch of math stories, and let me start with a summer job I had when I was in college. So when I was in college, I was kind of a nerdy math major, and so the summer job I had was to figure out how many people were going to have tuberculosis in the year 2050. That was my job. I went and worked in a biolab, and they asked me this question, and this is how it works. My boss gave me a big folder filled with papers. Every paper he had about tuberculosis, about its transmission rate, about the length of the maximally contagious period, about the etiology of the disease, all this stuff broken down by age and by date and by race and by sex and by nationality. I mean, a big folder, lots of papers. This was pre-Watson, guys, right? So I had to do this by hand, the way that we did. When I say a folder, I don't mean an icon, I mean a folder. And what did I do? I did what math majors do. I made a model, right? I took all this information and I put it together into a model of the progression of the tuberculosis epidemic. And I ran my model year by year, decade by decade. And when it got to 2050, it had a number. And I gave my boss that number and I got paid. And that was the end of my summer job. Okay, that was the end of my summer and that was the end of that job. But it's not really the end of the story. Like I said, I was kind of a nerdy math kid and I kept thinking about this problem. Even after the summer was over, I was troubled by something. I was troubled by the fact that each one of these numbers I was using, each one of these papers I was using, had a certain amount of uncertainty, right? It said a certain rate was 20%. Well, what did that mean? It meant it wasn't 0%, it wasn't 60%, but maybe it was 13%, maybe it was 25%, right? It's a little bit of wiggle room. And what happens when you run your model is that those uncertainties, small that they may be, they feed back into each other, right? And they multiply with each other, year over year, decade over decade, getting bigger and bigger. And what I realized is that by the time you got to 2050, the noise had totally engulfed the signal. By setting the parameters of my model, I could make it look like tuberculosis was going to be gone in the year 2050. Or I can make it look like every single human being on Earth was going to have tuberculosis in the year 2050. And both of those were totally consistent with the data that I had. And this is how I learned that sometimes the right answer to a math question is not a number, as I was led to think in school. Sometimes the right answer is I don't know. Actually, what's somewhat painful about this story, by the way, is that I know that my boss went around and gave lots of talks and said, this is our estimate, this is how many people are going to have tuberculosis in 2050, and I know that if anybody asked him, hey, how do you know that? He would have said, well, I hired a guy and he did the math. It's a little troubling. when I think about this story, actually what I think about, so stay with me here. Oh, there's my book, everyone. I hope you all got a good look. We're going to look at Theodore Roosevelt now. I think about a famous speech by Theodore Roosevelt that he gave in 1910, actually around the same time Thomas Watson was giving his speech that we just heard a clip from. Let me just read a little bit. Roosevelt says in 1910, he says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who at the best knows in the end the triumphs of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." Who knows it? Famous speech, right? It's very popular when you want to rev people up. Teddy's cousin, Franklin Roosevelt, quotes this when he's in his re-election speech of 1936. Nixon quotes it when he resigns. Brene Brown uses it in a TED Talk that's been seen over 4 million times. It has a lot of force. It has a lot of power. But what I want to tell you is that I don't think it's totally right. There's more to the story. It's complicated. To show you what I mean, let me tell you another story. It's another math story. This one's also a war story. It's about a guy called Abraham Wald, who was a mathematician from Hungary who fled Europe when the Nazis took over in the early 30s, ends up in the United States, ends up being a math professor at Columbia. And he spends the war as part of a group called the Statistical Research Group. It's a top secret installation of mathematicians and statisticians, some of the best in the country, who all meet in this little apartment in Morningside Heights in New York by Columbia to work on issues related to the conduct of the war, mathematical issues. So it's kind of like the Manhattan Project, except it's actually in Manhattan. And one day, a group of generals come to the SRG, and they come to Abraham Wald with a question, with a math question. They're looking at the planes that are coming back from flying missions over Germany. And they've noticed something. These planes come back and they're riddled with bullet holes, but the bullet holes are not evenly distributed across the plane. That's what they noticed. There's more holes in some parts of the plane than others. More holes on the fuselage, less holes on the engine. And they say, we want to know how to armor the planes. This is the business problem that they face, right? And it's a serious problem because if you put too little armor on the planes get shot down. If you put too much, the planes can't fly. They said, we got to figure out how much more armor to put on the parts of the plane that are getting hit more. Maybe we're hoping this is a formula for this, like some kind of equation that you math guys can figure out for us and tell us what to do. And Wald said, no, you've got it wrong. You need to put the armor where the bullet holes are not. Put the armor on the engines, not on the fuselage. This makes no sense. Why should we put the armor where the planes are not getting hit? And Wald explained to the generals, it's not that the Germans can't hit your planes on the engines. It's that the planes that got hit on the engines are not the ones that are coming back from Germany. And that is math. That is math in its essence. Not just to give a numerical answer, not just to do a computation, but to think differently, to interrogate the question and ask whether it's the right question, to ask what assumptions underlie it and whether they're correct. And that's part of what we're supposed to be doing as mathematicians. And Wald is who I think about when I think about Teddy Roosevelt kind of sneering at the cold, timid souls who were on the sideline, right? Because Abraham Wald is a guy who, as far as I know, never lifted a weapon in anger. He was undusty and unsweaty and unbloody, but he was right. He was a critic who counted. Here's a guy I like a lot. Do we know who this is? This is Nate Silver, a guy who, much as I love my profession, I have to admit, in an election year, this guy teaches more math to more Americans than every math professor in the country put together. I'm sorry, but it's true. This is the guy who predicts elections using data from polls, right? And has made a huge splash doing this. And what's interesting about Nate Silver is that not everybody likes what he does. I don't know if some of you guys in your businesses, everybody here is a true believer, right? Everybody here is going to use analytics and use Watson and use data to improve your business, but I'm sure some of you have to interact with people who do not like it and are suspicious of it. And Nate Silver gets this too, right? People will say, who's going to win the election? And he will say, you know what, we actually don't know. We don't know. Either guy might win, but I'm going to talk about probabilities. I'm going to tell you this guy's ahead. Maybe he has a 2 in 3 chance. Maybe I think he has a 3 in 4 chance. That's the kind of answer he's going to give, and I'm going to tell you that some people find that infuriating. They say, kind of like my boss said, I just want an answer. I don't want to hear about uncertainty. I want you to commit. I want you to tell me what's right. I want you to be in the arena. But part of what we have to do, if we're going to do analytics right, if we're going to do math right, is to talk about uncertainty and talk about it openly and tell the truth when the answer is, I don't know. Because sometimes, I don't know is the right answer. That was the right answer about tuberculosis. I mean, this is why some of the greatest minds in history worked so hard to develop a theory of probability. The theory that all of us are using, the theory that underlies Watson, and the theory that Nate Silver is using in his language, and he's made a mass success of it, talking about elections. Uncertainty. Here's another story that many of you have probably heard. Do you guys know this one? There was Target has an analytics program. It's called the Guest Marketing Analytics. That's their team at Target. They decided that one of their customers, a teenage girl in Minnesota, was pregnant. How did they decide this? Based on purchases, right? They have a lot of information, a lot of data. What have I got here? Unscented lotion, mineral supplements, and cotton balls. Doesn't that say pregnancy to you? And Target started sending her coupons to baby gear. But there was a problem because, of course, her parents got the mail. Okay, her dad was pretty pissed. He got on the phone with Target. Why are you sending my daughter this stuff? This is ridiculous. This is offensive to me. What you would probably all, if you don't know this story, you can probably guess the end. The daughter says, Dad, there's something I got to tell you. Okay, this is in a way spooky, right? You can fool your parents, but you can't fool your Target loyalty card. That's the message that people take from the story, but again, I want to tell you that that's not the whole story. The story is more complicated than that, because when you read about this story in the paper, they are not telling you how many people Target sent baby gear coupons to who were not pregnant. And that's part of the story too. Data is not magic. This is vitally important. Target does not know more about you than your parents do. They probably cannot. But here's the thing, they don't have to. Data does not have to be magic to be valuable. Target does not need to know exactly who's pregnant and who's not. What they do need is to be 1% or 2% or 5% better at inferring that information than they were without using the data. That's where the value comes, not from magic spookiness. You know, Netflix ran a contest a few years ago to improve their recommendation engine by 10%. By 10%, give 10% fewer bum recommendations for what movie to watch. They offered $1 million prize for this. I wrote a story about this for Wired, and I interviewed the CTO of that company, and I said, 10% does not sound like a huge improvement. Why are you giving away $1 million for this? He said, you fool! Okay, he didn't actually say those words, but I sort of saw it in his face. He said, you should be asking why we're giving such a small prize for a 10% improvement. And he was absolutely right, because that is what data is giving us, right? It's giving us the opportunity, as Mark said, to get things just a little bit quicker than we expect. But that 1%, that 5%, that 10% is real value, is real sales, is real customer loyalty, is real money. Data and math have limits. We heard yesterday, we saw in Steve's demonstration about complex adaptive systems. We saw how a complex system, non-hierarchical, bottom-up, can solve problems quickly and efficiently and correctly, which is awesome. But we should also remember that complex systems are complex, right? They don't always behave the way we expect. That's what makes them interesting. There's feedback, there's a fundamental uncertainty, and there's unpredictability. This is usually summed up in this famous parable, here illustrated, that many of you saw in Jurassic Park, about the butterfly, right? A butterfly flapping his wing can create a hurricane halfway around the world because the weather is a fundamentally chaotic and unpredictable system. I'm just going to leave this up for a while so we can all enjoy it while I make this mathematical point. And actually, there's something interesting is that in the 90s, the defense establishment became very interested in chaos theory. They really were interested in complex adaptive systems. They were right to be so interested, but I'm afraid that they had totally the wrong idea because the attitude of the military of that time was, we saw Jurassic Park, and we found out that a butterfly flapping its wing can create a hurricane halfway around the world. Get me that butterfly! Okay, that's not how it works. They understood the power of the math, but they did not understand its limits. And understanding math's limits is part of math. That's part of what we're supposed to be doing. That's part of what we have to do it correctly. There's a fundamental uncertainty. That's what Nate Silver grappled with. And that's what we grappled with. Jennifer talked about weather. Let's remember, if we had more data, all the data in the world, more sensors on the ground, more satellites, we could predict the weather better than we can now, no question. Maybe we could predict the weather 10 days, even 14 days into the future. But a month? No. There's physics that prevents us from doing that. There are limits to what we can do, and we have to know those limits. It's funny, the guy who really crystallized my thinking on this, sort of surprisingly, it was not Abraham Wald, it was not Nate Silver, it was not a mathematician at all, it was a poet. Here he is, John Ashbery, one of the great American poets. I don't know if you guys thought you were going to hear a poem today, but I feel it's a fitting way to conclude. Let me read the end of his poem, Soonest Mended, from 1966. He says, "And you see, both of us were right. Though nothing has somehow come to nothing, the avatars of our conforming to the rules and living around the home have made, well, in a sense, good citizens of us, brushing the teeth and all that, and learning to accept the charity of the hard moments as they are doled out. For this is action, this not being sure, this careless preparing, sowing the seeds crooked in the furrow, making ready to forget, and always coming back to the mooring of starting out that day so long ago. For this is action, this not being sure." This is a sentence I repeat to myself like a mantra. The world needs Teddy Roosevelt, right? The world needs doers of deeds, but the world needs critics too, and doubters and hesitators and questioners. Math and analysis have to do both of these things at once to take uncertainty and not just shrug, but make uncertainty powerful, something we can use. Not yes, not no, but I don't know. That's the answer to a lot of math questions. And for those questions, we have to be able to say, I don't know, with confidence. We have to say, I don't know, and here's what I'd have to know in order to know. We have to say, I don't know, and you don't know either. And this is the precise numerical extent to which neither of us knows. We don't always have to be critics, but when we do, we should be critics who count. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Great. Thank you. Wow, Jordan Ellenberg, everyone. My goodness, that was great. Well, we've come to the end of this session, so what have we learned? Well, first and foremost, math is a whole lot cooler than any of us thought. You are the agent for change in your organization, and to transform the way your organization makes decisions, you need the best tools and solutions possible, and that's why you are here. And that's why we want you to be back here this time next year. Here are the dates. We're back at this resort, May 8th to May 11th, 2016. I can't wait to see all of you again. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great time this afternoon with the breakout sessions and more, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.